So keep this in mind. These two things, marks of God's love. We're going to talk about the marks of God's love, and we're going to talk about the language of the body. We're going to make the claim that the body actually has a language. The body speaks a language. And so to kind of review, we talked about this. We talked about the fact, the statement, the belief that God is love. And that what is love? Love is willing the good of the other. And so then it says in the very top here, just really, really clearly, God is love. We most clearly image God when we love. We love Him through our bodies. Love requires action. It's not just about something I feel. It's not just, although we do, it's not just something I think about or something I intend. Love always requires action, right? It always requires a decision. That's why it's willing the good of the other. So it's actually doing something. So a couple things to kind of highlight here of these 4 sentences that we begin the afternoon with. Okay, God is love. We most clearly image God when we love. We love in and through our bodies. Love requires action. One of the things that John Paul II has said is he has said that without love, he says man cannot know himself without love. Without love, man remains a mystery to himself. He goes on to say, his life remains senseless if he does not experience love, enter into love, and become a gift of love. So again, what he's saying is, man cannot live without love. That without love, he remains a mystery to himself. Now, it's really interesting because as we talk about here, it says love is a term that's overused and undervalued. Love is a term that is overused and misunderstood. Because it says, as it says, we love everything from various foods to cars, movies to retailers, from people to God himself. And we don't necessarily consciously distinguish between love of my mom and love of my pizza. We don't necessarily distinguish between love of my dog and love of my God. We just say we love all those things, which is not incorrect. But there are at least 4 kinds of love in the ancient world. We only have one word. That one word is love. But we need to understand this. We need to actually enter into this more deeply. Because why? Because John Paul, if he's going to say man cannot live without love, that without love man remains a being incomprehensible to himself. His life remains senseless if he does not receive love, enter into love, and become a gift of love. If all we do, in our culture a lot of times, all we do is we take this massive concept of love, we reduce it to romantic love. And we take that concept of romantic love and reduce it to sex. And so when we hear John Paul II say man cannot live without love, we've taken love, reduced it to romantic love, reduced that to sex. What it sounds like the Pope saying is man cannot live without sex. Like, no, that's not what he's saying. That's not what the celibate Pope is saying. What he's talking about is that love is massively bigger than simply romantic love. And so the ancient Greeks had 4 kinds of love they would talk about. This is spelled out really phenomenally in an incredible book, one of my favorite books, but called The 4 Loves by C.S. Lewis. So the 4 kinds of love that the Greeks identified, first is storge. And storge is affection, love of affection. So it is the love that you have for your home. Like when you drive home, you walk into your house, if you have a home that you love walking into where you grew up, you walk in and you just, oh yeah, house smells like this. Or grandma's house, it smells like this. It's the love you have for your grandma. It's also the love you have for your mom. Storge is the love you have for your dog. Storge is the love, hopefully, you had over after Christmas break, and you came back to Duluth, and you came over the hill and drove down into town, and you're like, I'm home, I love this town. Like, that's Storge. It's awesome. It's affection. It is, C.S. Lewis says it's the most common of all loves. That common doesn't mean not valuable. It just means that, he says, I have the 4 Loves on audiobook, where he's actually the one reading it. It's so cool. And he says, Storge is like, he talks like that. Storge is like the rice upon which you put your pad thai. He says it's the base, that it's like holding all the other kind of loves in this. And so it's the love of affection. There's next love is Eros. That's the kind of love we typically think of when it comes to romantic love. And so Eros doesn't mean romance, it means desire. And so the love of desire, love of Eros, is often romantic. It also can be, we'll find out. Pope Benedict later on says that actually God loves us not just with storge or with agape, he also loves us with Eros, meaning he doesn't have romantic feelings about us. He desires us to be his. He desires us to be the ones who receive his love and who love him in return. So that Eros is erotic love, right? So it's a love that draws a person from themselves to another. A lot of affection, think about love of affection, think about this, where it's just kind of like, yeah, I really like this thing, I have a lot of affection for it. I might not be drawn to it, obviously, but when it comes into my life, I'm like, yeah, this is good. I like this a lot. Eros gets us, we either do these one of two motions. We either go out to it, or we want to bring it into ourselves. Because Eros can be used to go out, but also can be used to take in, to possess. There's a third kind of love, and that love is Philia. Now, here's an interesting thing. The Greeks actually considered, the philosophers, they considered Philia to be the highest love possible. They considered the Philia, friendship, to be higher even than Eros, which actually we do too. Like, as modern people, we consider Philia to be higher than Eros. Why? Because we know, even if we don't necessarily readily acknowledge it, we know that Eros can come and go. In fact, I don't know if anyone's ever read any of the stories, a lot of the romance stories of Shakespeare. Many of them, if not all of them, are all about how fickle Eros is. Remember, so how many people have read Romeo and Juliet? Okay, so you've read this. Pop quiz. At the beginning of the play, who is Romeo head over heels in love with? Rosalind, exactly. Well done, Nick, and there's someone back there. Rosalind is the person that Romeo is, he just can't stop talking about Rosalind. Rosalind is everything. And then he sees Juliet. Oh, wait. Juliet is everything. And I must have her or die. And it's ridiculous. These are like, 14 and a 16-year-old. They're very young in this play. And they've known each other for 2.5 days. And the great love story. No. This is a warning to those dating in junior high. And so Shakespeare knows that, no, Eros is fickle. It comes and it goes. And then it comes again, and then it goes again. And it's this person now, and that's that person, is that other person then. It's still good. But the Greeks realized there's got to be something deeper, more stable, more powerful than just that desire. And that's why almost every person, and I know the people who are engaged today, those who are like hoping to get engaged tomorrow, that one of the things people who are getting married say, what do they say? They will often say, or even like on their Facebook post, or Facebook is a social media app that was before, just kidding. Okay, so it's the thing you don't have that makes it so I can't stalk you to find out your name, or who you're dating. So today I did what? Yeah, on the wedding day. Today I married my best friend. Aww. Today I got engaged to my best friend. Today I'm going to spend the rest of my life with my best friend. All good things. It sounds like I'm making fun. I'm not. I'm kind of. But that means, what does it reveal? It reveals that we all know that Eros is good, but Philia is even better. If it wasn't, we would say, today I married the person I'm in love with. Okay, Sherlock. Well done. Good observation. But you're pointing out, now, this isn't just the person I'm in love with, because we know love is fleeting. Eros is fleeting. This is the person who's also my best friend, which is more stable. In fact, C.S. Lewis goes on to talk about Philia. True Philia is not just a pal, not just a buddy, not just a friendship of convenience or geography or usefulness, helpfulness. He says a person will have maybe one or maybe two true friends in their entire lifetime. That we have affection, storge for countless things. So good. We have Eros for any number of people. Also fine. But Philia is so rare that there are some people who never actually experience Philia in their entire lives. Who go through life not falling in love. Are you kidding me? Fall in love every other day. But never actually encounter someone who is a true friend. That's how rare it is. And then there's a fourth kind of love, and that love is never fully revealed, never fully unpacked until the New Testament. The Greeks they kind of had an idea about it, but they never really knew what it was. So they didn't think it was even possible. It's called agape, and that's the love of self-giving love, self-offering love. That even though I'm not getting anything out of this, I'm willing to give everything. So all of that is to say, when we say this one word love, it's, willing the good of the other. But it takes on these four shades, or these four forms, or these four loves. There's affection, awesome. Eros, awesome. Philia, awesome. Agape, awesomest. Every one of those first three have their strengths and their weaknesses. Agape is always going to be this love of gift. Always being this love. So does that make sense? So when John Paul II says, man cannot live without love, he's not saying, and if you don't get married, then you're up a creek. He's saying that even where you're at right now, you might not be dating anyone, you might never date anyone. You might not even be called to marriage. You might be incapable of marriage. But you are called to love. Even though we are mostly obsessed with Eros when it comes to love.
So we'll delve into, you have on your forms, we'll delve into Eros a little bit. So we talked about the ethos as the inner power of Eros. So Eros, again, we've all heard the term like erotic. That's the same basis. That's where we get that. And we always have a connotation like erotic literature, erotic cinema. It's going to be one thing. But again, what John Paul II is trying to get us to is that like, no. Eros, that's the question. Is Eros nothing more than lust? Is it always lust to feel Eros? And his point is no, it isn't. It's so hard to even fathom that. To feel Eros, to feel like that passion that we would say is erotic without just equating it with sex. But John Paul II says Eros, at its deepest level, is that inner power that attracts man to the true, the good, and the beautiful. Isn't that such a better way to view that passion, that fire in it? And you think the last time you were just wildly attracted to somebody. Like it just feels like a flame, like a heat. That, at its core, at its deepest level, when it's correct, is what attracts man to the true, the good, and the beautiful. Love songs. Love songs are almost always about Eros. So the thing is, especially with music, it can be tricky, it can be deceiving because the longing of Eros can seem to come across sometimes like it can be a beautiful song. You're like, oh, this is a beautiful love song. But like the reality of it can be even a bit deeper. You want to sing? Are you up for singing?
Yeah.
So if you guys know this song, you probably heard it. So. Oh, you could just play it.
I'm just gonna play it.
It was better when he sang it. It's better when he sings.
Oh wait. Here we go. Wait.
Driver's license. Is that what he's playing?
Yeah.
Driver's license.
Oh. Sorry. Here we go. Start again from the top, ladies.
You know that song, right? It's beautiful.
Question.
Okay, so that everybody knows that song. It's beautiful. The melody's beautiful. Tonight, your mind completely, and the light of love is in your eyes, and you give your love so sweetly. Those are all beautiful things. But like, I don't know. We've stuck with that song every year because I don't know if there's a better example of like a beautiful pop song that is so broken. Like just because what does she say? But will you still love me tomorrow? And have you ever stopped and think, like, this is a woman saying, like, you're saying all the nice things right now, but are you going to, like, this is in the moment of passion and heat, she's still just saying, will you love me tomorrow? Why? Because she knows that Eros is a thing, and it sings sweetly, and it gives itself so completely in the moment, tonight. And she keeps saying tonight, tonight you're mine completely. But will you love me tomorrow? And that's the question, like, can Eros be transformed so it gets to that point? John Paul II says in your next line, when erotic passion is set into the whole of the spirit's deepest energies, it can also become a creative force. So he's saying like, no, if Eros is rightly ordered inside, you don't have to restrain the Eros. That's not the point. The point is that it needs to be correctly ordered within inside you. And if it is set into the whole of the spirit's deepest energies, it can become a creative force. It can create. However, it must undergo a radical transformation. We have to admit, like again, you see John Paul II is seeking to salvage everything you have inside of you that doesn't need to go. He's trying to find everything inside of you that's good. So Eros, nobody can understand, like I'm so overwhelmed with these feelings. Yeah, okay, good. Because if it was set correctly, that would be a creative force. It just has to undergo transformation.
Yeah, because what John Paul II basically is saying is that Eros, the title of this subsection, ethos is an inner power of Eros. So if Eros is the love of desire, it's the love that wants to go either give or wants to grasp. And those are the two directions, right? But it's a power, like an affection, and kind of take it in. Again, mom's apple pie, I love it. Just take it in. But maybe I'd be like, I want the apple pie. But there's an element there where Eros has power to it. It's like a rocket ship thrusters, like the rocket thrusters of life. Again, it's what's in a person that says, I want to build skyscrapers, I want to sing love songs, I want to fight dragons, I want to go out and make something of myself so that then I can have. There's Eros in this. And so what happened is what's meant to be this rocket ship that makes a gift of self to Eros, like I love this person, I'm in love with this person, I want to be a full gift of self. In fact, what happens is the rocket thrusters have become inverted. And rather than push us outwards to become gifts of self to others, it's like now I use all that same power and I want to grasp and bring this person to myself. I want to actually grasp and have them instead of make a gift of myself to them. Does that make sense? And so you think about like, oh man, I'm just so broken. I want. All of that power is actually meant to be the opposite way, where it's I give. Imagine if our hearts were untwisted, and that's actually how we experienced Eros. That, again, remember ethos, the inner world, that what attracts me, what repels me. Imagine if all the power of Eros we have, all the power of that desire, was actually oriented in the right way. Now, here's what happened. There's this guy, Friedrich Nietzsche. You might have heard of him. He at one point was, all this might sound so antiseptic and might sound really, this is very formal, and isn't love not formal? Isn't love free? He said that Christianity poisoned Eros. He said until Christianity came on the scene, that Eros was all over the place, because you even had like the temple of the goddess Eros, or Aphrodite, depending on what culture you lived in. There was all these people who worshipped Eros, and here comes Christianity, and says, no, Eros isn't to be worshipped. Eros is actually not even the highest kind of love. And Nietzsche said that Christianity poisoned Eros. And you might be thinking right now, Father Mike, you and Nick are poisoning Eros for me, because I came here with my girlfriend or boyfriend, and now I'm like, whatever, what are you supposed to do? The reality, of course, is that Pope Benedict then responds to this. Pope Benedict is so smart, such an intelligent, wise, holy person. And what he did was, he knew all of Nietzsche's arguments. And he knew Nietzsche's arguments were, Christianity came on the scene and poisoned Eros. And Benedict points out, he says, okay, really? So you had all these temples to the goddess Aphrodite. You had all these temples to the goddess Eros. And what happened in those temples? Well, they had fertility worship. Basically, you would go to the temple and you would offer your sacrifice. Then you would go and have sex with the temple prostitute, and then you go eat the sacrifice. So basically, here I go to church, and then I go have sex, and then I have dinner, and go home. Going to church. And Pope Benedict says, Nietzsche, you think that was just full Eros. But what happens when you go to the temple and offer sacrifice, and then use a temple prostitute, and then have dinner? In the middle of the whole thing you've set up is use of another human being. So Nietzsche's saying that's the height of Eros, and Benedict says that's the height of use. In fact, Benedict points out, he says, to just give your heart over, your life over to Eros is a descent. Here's a quote. An intoxicated and undisciplined Eros. Basically, I'm in love with love, just drunk on love. And undisciplined Eros, remember last talk we talked about, it has to, in order to be spontaneous, I first have to be disciplined. He says that an intoxicated and undisciplined Eros then is not an ascent into ecstasy towards God, but a fall, a degradation of man. That rather than Christianity poisoning Eros, Christianity set Eros free. It actually, what it meant to do, it goes out, evidently, Eros needs to be disciplined and purified if it's not to provide just a fleeting pleasure, but a certain foretaste of the pinnacle of our existence, that which our whole self yearns. But it has to undergo that transformation, where again, the rocket thrusters are not to myself, but to be a gift of myself.
And the way I always liken it is, like when you first, everybody has like looked across the crowded room and seen like somebody. I remember the night I met my wife. We were in college. She wasn't my wife yet, but I saw this woman, and I looked. We're at these auditions for these one acts, and I looked across the room, and then it was like soft light. There's fat angels just flying over her, like pointing. It was like the Sistine Chapel. I remember seeing her across the room, and I was overwhelmed. She is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Then and now, I saw her, and it was like a wave. So that's millisecond number one. Recognizing beauty, that's a good thing. We should actually be able to see beauty everywhere. We should actually be able to look around and recognize beauty everywhere. Millisecond number one is good. Nobody in the church is saying it isn't. God created that moment where you're just amazed at someone's beauty. That's good. It's millisecond number two that needs to be transformed. It's they happen so close, it's almost like the same moment in our perception. Where millisecond number 1 sees the person. You look across the room and you say, oh, wow. So millisecond number 1 is wow. Millisecond number 2 is where you say, come here. Like, you're mine. Like, I want. Those are separate moments. Recognizing beauty is good. Wanting to have it for yourself. It's like, I would say, like, if you went to like an art museum, you like went to the Louvre or whatever, and you're looking around like, these are really awesome. And then just like tried to take one off the wall and go home with it. Well, it's beautiful. I want it. Like, you can't. It's not yours. That's what they would say. That's stealing. That's not yours. Yes, it is beautiful. We recognize that, but it's not yours. And that is where John Paul II is saying, and that is where Eros needs to be transformed. Not recognizing beauty, but wanting it for yourself. Not seeing something gorgeous or someone gorgeous, but wanting to possess it. That's what needs to be transformed. That's why he's saying, like, when the passion is set right, it becomes a creative force. And the best example of this is Christ on the cross. This is do you know how beautiful you are in God's eyes? How proud of you and enthralled by you God is. He made you just to gaze on you and love you. And when he sent his son, when Christ came, this is the perfect example of what real love does. I see your beauty, I see your peril, I see the situation you're in, and I'll die. I'll die for you. I'll bleed out for you. I'll give my last breath. I'll give up my ghost for you because you are worth it. That's an example of correct Eros. Christ felt Eros for you and I. He did. He felt that for us. The passion, like there are times you see in Scripture where he's like looking over the city and he's like, I came to set the world on fire. I wish it was already on fire. You get these moments where he is so passionate for you. Even turning tables over in the temple, you get Eros. You get this fire in him. He loves you so much, he doesn't want anything in the way. And how does he show it? He goes to the cross because his Eros is disciplined. It is perfect. And we have it in the text box. Love promises infinity, eternity. Again, pause. If you've had moments where you're falling in love with somebody, and it just seems like I see our future. I see walks on the beach. I see our children. I see it all. And it's real. It's almost attainable. Love promises infinity, eternity, a reality far greater and totally other than our everyday existence. It promises that. Yet we have also seen that the way to attain this goal is not simply by submitting to instinct. Purification and growth in maturity are called for, and these also pass through the path of renunciation. Far from rejecting or poisoning Eros, they heal it, and they restore it to its true grandeur. And he's talking in the middle of there about renunciation, growth in maturity, purification. All those things, what love promises is attainable. That's why love never stops promising it. But we first have to go through the weeds and say, okay, I don't want to get rid of Eros. I want to feel this. I don't want to be cold and numb. I want to feel this passion. I want Eros to be uninhibited in me. Then we just have to recognize that it can't in its current state in our lives.
And so one of the ways we just test ourselves in this is we simply say, okay, in this moment, can I say no? When it comes to using another, when it comes to even taking, is the question, can I say no? Because if I can't say no, what does my yes mean? It's because I'll talk to, again, couples all the time. We're we just love each other so much that we fall into this era. We love each other so much we keep falling in this place. Okay, wait, so what you're saying is, what I'm hearing is not that you love each other so much, it's that you're unable to tell yourself no. When it comes to your desire to act on these emotions physically. So the question is, wow, let me examine my own heart and say, if I can't say no, then am I really even saying yes? If I can't say no, then what does my yes even mean? It's simply me submitting to my instincts. And so what happens is, again, saying this, and not by way of condemnation, but just in way of illumination. Because this is all of our hearts. We get to this place where it's okay, I don't know necessarily what it's like to just be able to drive around in a car with fully inflated tires. And now you're telling me that if I can't, then there's something off. Maybe, yes, I am. Because there is something about having everything aligned. There's something about having everything right.
So
every car I've ever owned and driven just was a crappy car, and they were all given to me, and they all had horrible alignment. Have you ever driven a car with bad alignment? It's so hard. It's like the deflated tires thing. It's you can't. There's no moment you can just let up and relax because the car pulls and pulls and pulls. And every car that I've ever driven since I turned 16 has had that. That's the state of affairs I live in. And so one time this is years ago, I was traveling to visit some friends in North Dakota, and I didn't want to take my car because I was pretty sure it wasn't going to make it. So I asked my grandpa, he's a great man. I asked my grandpa if I could use his white Grand Am. And my grandpa it's reciprocal of my car. Like, my car is, broken and his is fixed. And my car is dirty and his is not. And so my grandpa let me use his beautiful car, this pristine vehicle, to drive to North Dakota. Anybody from North Dakota? Okay, no? That's good. You don't like those people. So anyway, I'm driving to North Dakota, and the North Dakota roads, basically you can see across the state. Like, it's just a straight line. All the roads are just straight for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Let's just be straight. And so I'm driving the car, and I was alone. I was just, kind of cruising along. And it sort of slowly dawned on me at one point that the car wasn't pulling at all. I was just cruising. I had it on cruise, and I was just flying. And I'm sitting there in the car, and it hits me, and I was like, oh. So then I just slowly, no one's gonna know. And I took my hands off the wheel, and I didn't touch the wheel for 3 miles. 3 full miles. I was having a religious experience. Oh, praise the Lord! For me, it was just, ha-ha! It was enlightenment and nirvana. It was everything in one. It was this amazing experience. This is what driving. I just got in the back and took a nap. It was awesome. I was so carefree. And the thing is, it hit me really strongly. That is what God intended us to do. It isn't restraint. That's not what the intent was. We need restraint, grace and grit. But the intent, the goal we're going for, is to give up those parts of us that need to be transformed, so much so that we don't have to. We can just live. We can race. We can run. Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're getting at. Is that's the purification you want. You want, okay, God, whatever pulls me to the side, please fix it. I want to be like that Grand Am. I just want to cruise. I just want to fly. But it requires renunciation of the things that pull you to the side. Maybe it's a person who's pulling to renounce. Maybe it's a habit. Renounce. Give those things to God. Give them to Him. Allow them to be purified. When I was younger, I was a gymnast, and my coach at one point sat me down with my parents and just said, listen, if Nick will give me 7 years, we can go to the Olympics. If he just works hard, we can get there. And I didn't even need to think about it. I was like, nope. I just want to date people and be in high school. I didn't want to do it. So I didn't. It was basically at that point, she was like, all right, well, I don't know what you're doing then. Just go jump on the trampoline. Just go waste your time, because if you're not going to do this, you will never get this. And that's basically, if you really want the love that God is putting forward and that we talk about in the Bible and in John Paul II and that we're talking about, if you actually want that love, then you do. You just have to take those things that pull you, because your goal is straight ahead. Bliss with Him, intimacy with Him, true relationships in this life, living love. If you want that, you just have to renounce the things that pull you to the side.
And that's not to say that we can't have a future until you renounce all these things. Until you're perfect, don't even think about getting in a relationship with somebody. That's just actually, John Paul, that's not what we're saying. John Paul II actually called marriage and family, he called it the school of love. Which means you don't show up to school knowing everything, right? You learn in the process of being at the school. And so if marriage and family is the school of love, you don't show up fully formed. You don't show up, I know everything. It's actually, I show up and I'm learning now how to love. And again, how many times, engaged couples and married couples who go back and say, oh my gosh, I did not realize how to love my husband. I did not know how to love my wife when we first got married. And that makes sense. Why? Because it's called the school of love. You don't show up perfect. It's what perfects you. In fact, I always say that marriage is a place where good people go to die. Aww. See it, womp. Marriage is a place where good people go to die to themselves in order to learn how to live for the other. Go to die to myself to learn how to live for the Lord and loving the other. And so that leads us, if it's a school of love, let's go back to the definition of love. It's willing to go to the other. And yet we have this thing called the marks of God's love. You can see this. If there's no standard in the world of what love should look like, then where should we look? And you have Ephesians chapter 5. We already heard a little bit about that. I'm going to skip over that. You can read it on your own. It's scripture. It's really good. But if you go to the section that says the 4 marks of God's love, If you look through all the Bible, you recognize that God's love consistently and always has these 4 marks. Whenever God loves, he loves in these 4 ways. These are 4 characteristics or 4 marks, 4 qualities of God's love. God's love is always, always free. It's always total. It's always faithful. It is always fruitful. And we have in John chapter 15, Jesus gives us a commandment. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. So we look and say, okay, here is how God loves. God loves freely. He loves totally. He loves faithfully. And he loves fruitfully. Meaning, if I'm going to love like God, that's how I have to love. Freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully. AKA marriage. So let's break this down. If my love doesn't look like God's love, it's not love. We're going to get to this. This is kind of important. If my love doesn't look like this, if it's not free, total, faithful, and fruitful, then it actually isn't love. So free, what do we mean by free? God is never coerced into loving us. God's never coerced into entering a covenant with us. God always, on his own, he says, basically, I can do whatever. I choose to do this. He's not forced into this. He's not guilted into this. He's not manipulated into this. God always freely chooses to give of himself. And so you can see that if someone's forced to do something or strongly pressured or acting out of fear, then it's not really a gift. And so it has to be free.
The second is total. So again, these are marks of God's love. So we know that God always gives totally. God doesn't hold anything back. He didn't even hold back his son, even to death on a cross. He poured out everything. So if we're going to live in the same way, and it's so daunting to think about, but this is what we need to do. We need to strive to live totally for us, and we need to give ourselves totally. So spouses are called to give themselves completely to the other and to receive the other person completely in return. The mutual gift of self is at the heart of what is expressed in sexual relations in marriage. So just that idea, my wife and I, on our wedding day, 20 years ago, I gave myself to her, I gave my body to her, but I also gave my hopes, my dreams, my career goals, anything I'd ever held dear. I took everything that was me, and I placed it on the altar of marriage. I placed it in her hands, and vice versa. That's what you do. You look across from the person, and you both have come there together. So you're both doing this. Likewise, she did the same thing. She looked into my eyes, took her hopes, her dreams, her career goals, every aspiration she'd ever had, and gave them to me. Totally. There's nothing that you hold back. And again, it's not that you can do this perfectly yet, but you're striving to. Why? Because these are the marks of God's love. That's what we have the inspiration for it, because that's how he treats us. He never holds anything back, but he gives himself completely.
And again, as it says in your notes, the total gift of self also includes the gift of fertility. It's not myself partially, it's including this incredible gift, and also faithful. So God's love is free, total, and faithful. I think about all the times in the Old Testament and the New Testament and in our lives when we enter into this relationship with God and then we're unfaithful. And yet the entire time he remains faithful. In fact, there's this book of the prophet Hosea. You might know the story of Hosea. Hosea was a prophet who was called not to simply prophesy with his words, but with his actual life. And so God called Hosea to marry a woman named Gomer, who was a prostitute. Talk about a double whammy. And dearest Gomer, no, I'm just sorry, that's just not. Knowing that Gomer would be unfaithful to him. But God said, but Hosea, you need to be faithful to her, even though she's unfaithful to you. Why? Because that's how I love. I never take back my love once I've freely and totally given it. I am always faithful. And so here's a couple. It says here, it is not easy because every married couple goes through times and seasons of difficulty. But God's grace offers the ability to be faithful even in the midst of an unfaithful world.
And then the last is fruitful. So, and this is connected to the total as well, but if you don't hold anything back, then you don't hold your fertility back. In marriage, the couple pledges to be open to accepting children from God and raising them as his sons and daughters. Any and every method of contraception would be a violation of fruitful love. And this is really difficult. That's one of the most hated teachings of the church. The most misunderstood. The fact that, why? Why do I have to? Well, because, again, God's love is always fruitful. When God's love comes into your life, wherever you let him in, it brings life. That's what God is always doing. Even when the scriptures, when there was nothing, when there was no creation yet, you get the Holy Spirit hovering over the surface of the waters, and then what happens? All of creation. And then you get the Holy Spirit descending upon Mary. And what do we get? The Savior of the world. We get the Holy Spirit descending upon the church. God's presence descending on the church. And what? That's the birthday of the church at Pentecost. God's love is always in everywhere that you let him into your dark heart, you come alive. And so to image that, again, if we're going to strive to be like that, if we realize every time I let God in, I come alive. It's fruitful. It brings fruit. And we turn around and say, but I don't want that in my own life. Then we don't image God. But what we're striving for is to do this, is to say, like, no, I want wherever I'm loving to be fruitful. I want there to be life. I want children. I don't want to do anything. And like it says, any and every means of contraception would be a violation. Why? Because it just, contracepts, like against life. It means, no, I don't want life to come from this. Very clearly. And that's what you strive to. You strive to be like God and bring fruit and bring life.
And it's not important. Free, total, faithful, fruitful. These are our motives, but it's not just enough to have them be our motive. Like I want to have, I desire that my love is free, total, faithful, fruitful. It also has to be in actuality. It has to be in reality. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. Why? Because this afternoon, is because we recognize that we don't love each other in dreams. Actually, true love doesn't exist in dreams. It only exists in action. That we say love is a verb, not just a feeling. It's a decision, not just a wish. And at the same time, we recognize that we're a jumble of emotions, right? We're a jumble of contradictions, we're a jumble of motivations. So I remember doing marriage prep with my little sister and her fiance at the time, which is an experience to be able to have, that everyone should have. At one point, I remember my sister, she had said, so one of the worst weddings I've ever done, wedding rehearsals, my least favorite wedding rehearsal of all time was my little sister's. I love her husband, love the wedding. The rehearsal was just so bad because normally I'd show up and like, okay, listen to the priest. I show up, they're like, we don't have to listen to Mikey. I'm like, no, you guys, I'm still in charge. But in their prep, at one point, Sarah got mad at me because she was like, you have to give us like the full marriage prep experience. Like, you can't just like, oh, it's my sister again, phone it in. Like, Sarah, I love you a lot. You're the last person I'm going to phone it in for. So we're talking about everything, and we talked about everything. They're a very open couple. And at one point, I remember them saying, so like, we went through this free and total, faithful, fruitful. She said, but like, I wonder, what if we're in the midst of like intimacy? I'm like, no, you're not talking about this. What if we're intimate, having marital relation? What is it? Marital embrace? Yes. And like, I'm not thinking free, total, faithful, fruitful, free, total, faithful, fruitful. And like, what if like the desire to use the person is there? And again, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to throw up, but just kidding. It's not gross. It's beautiful. And I'm like, I get it. Sarah, this makes sense. We are a jumble of motivations. We are a jumble of different desires. We are just a mix of, not everything we desire is completely pure. Not everything we desire is always just going to fit into this really nice, neat thing. And so it's not that I always have to be thinking or desiring the right thing. What I have to be aware of is I can't be contradicting free, total, faithful, fruitful with my actions. That's the first and most important step. I can't be working against free, total, faithful. I might not always feel free, total, faithful, fruitful. I might not always be thinking free, total, faithful, fruitful. But what I have to look at my actions say, but am I ever stopping that? Am I ever working against freedom? How can I work against freedom? Well, talked about it. Coercion. Manipulation. I remember talking with a couple and they were dated all through college and they're great. They had often come to talk to me about how they kept messing up in their sexual relationship with each other before they were married. And I remember doing marriage prep and getting ready to get married. And at one point they came in and he was kind of exasperated. He's like, she just told me that after we get married, there's like still rules. Because he's been like, I've been white knuckling this whole thing, like trying to not like fall, trying not to do this, even though we keep like steering off the curb and off the cliff. He's like, but I was thinking like, okay, but when we get married, then it's just like, whew, let's go, He's like, but she told me there's rules after you even get married. And I'm like, uh-huh. And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, picture this. I said, how many times? So they were very open as well, opener than my sister and brother-in-law. Very open about their struggles, open with the dynamic of that relationship when it came to those falls, when it came to like how they cared for each other. And at one point I said, okay, picture the scene. Here you are married now. And at some point, I will call him Jack and Jill. Jack, you come home and you come to Jill and you let her know whether your words or your actions, that, hey, you're ready to go. And Jill says, no, not right now, I'm literally making supper, kind of something like this. If she at any point, you know this, if she at any point she says no to you, Jack, you're a good guy, he's a great guy. Jack, you know what you're going to do. You're not going to cause a fight. You're not going to argue with her. You're not going to be physical with her. You're just going to say, okay. And you're going to go to the fridge, get out a beer, go in the other room, and watch the Twins game. And then, when she comes into the living room and says, Jack, how you doing? You're going to be watching the Twins game. Good. How was work today? Okay. How are the Twins doing? Fine. Jack, what's wrong? Nothing. And you know that's what's going to happen. Because you're married now, so she has to be ready whenever you're ready. And it was so interesting, that saying, and then so Jill, you'll know this. So you know that here comes Jack, he's coming home. Here he is making these advances, making these gestures of affection. And now I know, I either just give him what he wants right now, or I put up with his passive-aggressive behavior for the rest of the night. So here are my two options. No one's going to be a jerk about this whole thing. No one's going to be like a complete monster about this whole thing. He's just going to be quiet and be about his own life. So either that's what you get, or you do this other thing. And it was so incredible because, again, they're so honest with each other. Such a good couple. That Jack was just like, he was just like, oh my gosh, that's what I would do. And she was like, yes, I know. That's what you would do. But they had this sense of like, he was so convicted, he was like, I never ever want to do that to you. I would never want you to just have sex with me or to have some kind of physical action with me simply because you didn't want me to pout if I didn't get what I wanted. So coercion can even be like that. I'm working against freedom because I'm not going to be a jerk, but I'm also not going to be loving. Those are your options. But that would be definitely contrary to that mark of God's love, which is free.
So then, working against total. Again, these are just ways that you have them written down here, but like that you can make note. Okay, how do I fight this? How do I not actively work against? Working against totality would be emotional distance, where like, yeah, okay, I mean, I'm gonna hold some of me back. I'm not gonna give you that part of me. Refusal to be vulnerable. Climax apart from intercourse. That's so like basic and nitty gritty and sounds weird to talk about, but I mean, if we're talking about intimacy, then again, we know that climax, where fertility is able to happen, climax apart from intercourse then, in any way, that ends up being not total. You actually, like think of the man, you did not give your actual self to anybody. You didn't actually give your body to receive that at all, because it was apart from intercourse. Again, these are ways to just be like, okay, if you don't ever do that, you're working toward fertility, towards totality. And you can, okay, I just won't do that because that would be working against. Keeping my distance. I mean, you'll hear it, like guys can say like, well, she can have my body, of course, and she can have some of my time, but my paycheck's mine. Well, then that means you're choosing to hold something back from the one that you say you love most. I've had women who say like, well, I don't know. I have a past. I have brokenness in my past, and I feel like I don't really trust this person to give them, my heart. Well, if this person isn't trustworthy for your heart, then they don't get your body either, because it wouldn't be total. You're taking all that stupid like all of me. That guy, I hate that song. Or the verses anyway. The verses are very childish, but the chorus is kind of a good point. Yeah, all of me. You're taking all of yourself. And if you're aware, and God will bring this to mind, if you're aware of any part of you that you're holding back, your future, like I say career goals on purpose, because that's the thing these days. Well, no, I have my career, that's mine, that's my life. You take your life and place it in somebody's hands. And the way to actively make sure you're not working against totality is to A, make sure you're in a relationship where the person is worthy of that trust. But B, make sure you don't actively hold yourself back. If you're aware, I'm really pulling back from him, then find the way to not do that. Oh yeah, I guess our relationship, we haven't had intercourse, but we just do all the other stuff. Okay, well then you're holding all of yourself back. And that's how you can be aware that you're working against it.
Another that thing, faithful, we'll go through this relatively quickly, because the faithful one is the most obvious, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, okay, I'm cheating on this person with another person. But also, it can include fantasizing about someone else. That sense that people would say, like, well, just because I'm on a diet, it doesn't mean I can't look at the menu. Like, actually, you shouldn't. And when it comes to human beings, we're different than food, where people are meant to be loved, not ever meant to be used. And so that recognition of, okay, so what constitutes faithfulness? It's not just I didn't step out on my spouse with someone else. It can also be in the moment of intimacy, I'm thinking of someone else. There's this movie called The Devil's Advocate, which is so good. It's dated. It's a youngish Keanu Reeves. But at one point, Al Pacino is the devil, literally the devil. And he's just trying to lure this man who's ambitious and is bright and is relatively intact away from himself, away from God. They don't really mention God a lot too much. But anyway, they mention the devil a lot. But at one point, here is Keanu Reeves. He's in the marital embrace with his wife, Charlize Theron, and in the midst of this, they show flashes of what he's seeing or what he's thinking, and then as he's with Charlize Theron, his wife, he has these images of a woman from his work. And at one point, his wife says, stop, where are you? And he's like, I'm right here. And she says, no, you're not. And it's just this incredible glimpse of that would be working against faithfulness. It doesn't have to be just the action, but I've intentionally brought someone else into this relationship, even if in my own mind.
And then fruitful is just very straightforward. It's any method of contraception, anything that is against life, that would stop this act from being fruitful, that ends up being, that you're working against fruitfulness.
Yeah, so okay, moving on to the next piece. Does that make sense? It's the three total faithful. Our love has to look like this, or else not love. But let's go on. There is, because this is theology of the... Thank you, I'm still awake. The body has a language. We're going to make this claim. The body has a language. And that language, we can, just like any other language, we can speak truth with our bodies, and we can speak lies with our bodies. And John Paul points this out. He points out so clearly that written into the very way that we're built is, if I do X, I am saying X. If I do Y, I'm saying Y. Now, again, we know the body has a language. In fact, what do the researchers say? They say that what percentage of our communication is nonverbal? Anyone?
It's like 80 or 90.
80%, 90%, 100% of our communication is nonverbal. So Nick and I are just going to mime the rest of this talk. Okay, so I remember at one point, if that's possible, if we can speak with our bodies, then we can also lie with our bodies. In fact, I remember a man, his name is Ron. Ron lives down in Stewartville, Chatfield area, and he just buys a bunch of land. He's like a real estate farmer. He just likes acquiring land and farming it and making money. And at one point, I remember Ron said, "Oh, Father Mike, I just bought this whole new piece of property, da 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 da." And I said, "Wow, that must be a lot of contracts and a lot of this." He said, "Nope." Nope. I looked at him, said, "You pay this price?" And I said, "I'll do this." Shook hands. He was done. Like, wow. It's like, I'm going to hold up in court. But there's that sense of, right, so I'm agreeing to this. I'm going to look at you in the eye, shake your hand, and say, this is the agreement. This is saying something. Like I'm communicating something here. And we know that if Ron was to shake this guy's hand, the whole while the man knows that he's actually intending to swindle Ron, that he'd be lying with his body. That this gesture would be not telling the truth, it would be a lie. In fact, I remember there was a young man who was a student at UMD, and we'll say his name was Keith. And not his real name, to protect the innocent. At one point, Keith, who was raised Catholic and wasn't really interested, he was going to study abroad in Australia. And so Keith even said, I remember the day I was going to leave, because I had a crucifix on a chain. And I remember taking off the crucifix and putting it in my drawer, shutting the drawer and saying, hopefully this will be here when I get back. But I'm not going to take him with me. And he went to Australia with it. Keith, tall, blonde, and handsome, big hit with the ladies of Australia. And he just basically lived it up as much as he possibly could. At one point, Keith developed a sexual relationship with this woman in Australia. That's all they knew each other as. He comes back to the States with the arrangement that at some point she'd come visit. And he comes back that summer. He came to Newman and was part of a bunch of our events and basically encountered Jesus in a way that really changed his life, like dramatically changed his life. And so he was growing over that summer, over that fall, he was growing and kept getting holier. I'm just more and more convicted and strong in his faith. And at one point, he's like, Father, we have to talk. Okay, how come? He says, okay, remember how when I was in Australia, I had these relationships and this and that? I said, yeah, you told me all about it. He said, yeah, so one of these girls, we made plans that she'd come and visit me and my family over Christmas, and she has a plane ticket, and she's going to be here in 2 weeks, for 2 weeks, and all we know each other with is like just sex. We don't know anything else about each other except for sex. And I know that I shouldn't do that anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I remember at one point it was the Christmas party for Newman, which we'll have once again someday. And he was going to pick her up at the Duluth airport. And he texted and said, okay, remind me again, why can't we have sex? Like, okay, because of this. Okay, good. I've got it. I've reminded. That's what I know. So he picks her up. She gets in the car, and he's like, I'm excited to see you, etc. And he goes over. He's a very go-getter kind of guy. Really charming, really fun to be with. At one point, he said right away, he's like, okay, I've got all these things planned for us for the next 2 weeks. We're going to go snowmobiling. I got some snowmobiles. We're going to go skiing. We're going to do all these things. And he just laid out this really fun 2-week adventure for this Australian girl in northern Minnesota. And then he said, so we're going to my parents' place. She's like, your parents' place? Yeah. So I made up my room. So you're going to sleep in my room, and I'm going to sleep in the guest room or like on the couch or something like this. And she was like, wait, what? He's like, oh yeah, I should mention. Oh yeah, you reminded me. He said, oh yeah, I should let you know that. So when I came back from Australia, I met Jesus, and I was raised Catholic, but I am Catholic now, and I know that I know what we did in Australia, and I know that you're worth so much more than that, and God has called you and me to something better than this, and we're gonna have a great time, but we can't have sex during this time that you're here. And she's like, oh, you can drive me back to the airport. Like literally, she said this. I was driving away. She said, you can just turn around. You can drive me back to the airport. And he's like, no. Like it'll be fun. I have it all planned out. It'll be really great. We like each other. And she's like, no, Keith. Sex might mean something to you. It doesn't mean that to me. And I'm glad that you found God and whatever. But it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm glad it's important to you, but it means nothing to me. And he had the wherewithal at that moment to say, he just kind of paused, and he was nice about it, gentle about it, but he said, okay, wait, let me get this straight. You say that sex means nothing to you, but you literally flew halfway around the world to visit me on the idea that we would have sex. And now that you know we're not going to, you're literally going to fly the other half around the world just to go home, because we're not going to do this thing that means nothing to you. So clearly, regardless whether you believe in God or not, it means something. Because why? Because the body has a language, and we're always saying something, even if we don't mean to say it. Sometimes we're still saying it.
So I lived in China for 2 years. We were teachers, and I taught high school. My wife taught in first grade, and so one time we had kids from all over the world at this international school that we taught at. And so one time I was going down to the bathroom, and as I was coming out was this little kindergartner named William, and he was cute, little British kid, pub cap and a pipe. He was awesome. And he comes out of the bathroom. That's how British people walk. He comes out of the bathroom, and I was like, he was like, hello, Mr. Nick, and I was like, hey there, what's up? And I went into the bathroom, and he walked away. And so I used the restroom, and when I got done, I came out of the restroom, and coming down the hallway was little William, and then his teacher, had her arm around him, and they were coming toward me, and he was just puffy-faced, crying, just weeping. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? She goes, I don't know. He said he saw you in the hallway, and you were really mean to him. And I was like, oh, William, what's the matter? What happened? And he said, well, you did this. And what I didn't know was that in England, this means this. Yeah. So if you go back a couple minutes, poor little William's walking out of the bathroom. He's like, hello, Mr. Nick. I'm like, yeah, whatever, buddy. That's what he saw. That's what I said to him. And he was just, did I mean to? No, I didn't ever mean to make him cry British tears. Like, I'm not mad about the tea tax or anything. I'm past all that. Like, I don't have anything against this kid. I meant to say peace. I just didn't know. And so like to find out, I'm like, oh my gosh, so I meant to say one thing, but I said another thing. You didn't expect to get flicked off in church today, did you? I just feel a little bad. It's different here than... Yeah. I'm sorry. I'll hide it down here. But like my body, I meant to say one thing, but my body actually said something else. And I caused actual pain. And that's what, John 1 second, that's what the church is saying. It's like, no, your body, it just speaks a language. When two people come together, your bodies say something. Your bodies say that I'm here freely. This isn't rape. This is free. Your body is saying you're there freely. Totally, because your body actually wants to be totally involved in that process. Faithfully, your bodies are saying, like, it's just us two here. And fruitfully, your body tries to create life. Your body is saying all these things to each other. Your bodies are speaking. They're speaking a language. And you could not mean any of it. And so that's the language of the body. It'd be like us encountering this, saying like, well, that's not what I mean, so just get past it. That's like if I were to look at William and be like, you're stupid, I didn't mean that, get over it. I didn't. I felt so bad that I made him cry. I did. I won't do that again. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that would hurt your feelings. I won't do it again. And that's when it comes to our body, it speaks a language. And now this is foreign, because up until maybe most of you, up until today, sitting in this room, you've never been told that. It was like me. I didn't know that meant something elsewhere. I just didn't know. And so for you, it's not even a blame thing. It's not a guilt thing. But you might not have known until this moment that your body speaks a language. That you're saying things on a very real level that you might not even mean at all. So then the challenge is just to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. If that makes sense. I didn't know. I'm not gonna lie anymore. Because I really, at the core, that's what it is. Like I didn't realize that I was lying with every act. I didn't realize it was a lie. And that's what happened in my marriage. I didn't realize, until I found Theology of the Body, I didn't realize how unloving I was being on so many levels. But then when I did, then you have that decision. Okay, well then I won't lie anymore. Then I'm done. I won't. And now that I know about the language, what do you do with it?
And again, this is not meant to be condemnation, just meant to be a revelation. And that illumination of the reality. And John Paul II points this out. Remember, here's Adam and Eve, and they wake up and they realize, wait a second, we go together. There is something about us that says something. Whenever two people enter into the sexual embrace, every single time, this is what I'm saying. It's what he calls the nuptial meaning of the body, or the nuptial language of the body. Even if I mean something else, like I don't mean total, I don't mean faithful, we just don't even know each other. Or I don't mean forever, because we've only been dating six months, you know. It always says that, though. Again, please, like Nick had said, please don't hear any condemnation in this, especially when we just don't know any better. So I'll tell you. So back in the day, when I was a kid, I loved Tarzan. I thought Tarzan was like the best ever. I wanted to be Tarzan. I wanted to be stranded on a shore, raised by apes. Didn't get the chance, so I did my best. So I would run around in the woods, as I mentioned, behind my house. Luke Skywalker, Indiana Jones, Tarzan was the number one person. And so at one point, there was this catalog that came to my parents' house called International Male Catalog. You probably don't know what that is because you are not as old as me. And what International Male Catalog was basically Victoria's Secret for men. And so it was like, there's clothes, but then there was all these here, I don't know, I think my mom was ordering my dad's stuff. We don't need to go down that road either. But at one point, there were these male swimsuits. And so I grew up as a swimmer, a competitive swimmer. So when someone would say, hey, put on your suit, that meant a Speedo. Like that was just, don't picture that, that's just what it is. That's just what it was. So put on your suit means put on a Speedo. Very comfortable in that because of the fact that that's what you do in order to go fast through the water. So I'm looking through this catalog and I see the suit. This is the suit that I was made for. It was a leopard print thong with a leopard print flap in the front and flap in the back. And in my 15-year-old genius, I remember taking this bank catalog and going, oh my gosh, this is it. Going to my mom saying, Mom, can I have this swimsuit? And she looked at it, and she looked at me. No. Like, Mom, I mean, honestly, I came back. No, Mom, please, could I please have this swimsuit? And she's absolutely not. And I was so mad and devastated and just thought, because all I could picture was me like maybe at the lake running off the dock, like I just thought, this is perfect, climbing trees in the backyard with this. And all my mom said, no. My mom could see clearly. So I would not, okay, if you saw this, if you saw someone wearing this, you would say, okay, I know what that person's saying. I would wear it because I want to say Tarzan. You would see it and think, cheeks. Now, here I am. I don't mean cheeks, I mean Tarzan, but you'd be like, no, cheeks. And this is the thing, so many of us, even when it comes to like modesty and dress, bring that up as a topic in a video. Never, ever, not this guy. Because you can never talk about clothing, you never talk about modesty, and people would feel so attacked and condemned. But this is the thing. I realized firsthand, no, I just thought this will be fun. Ladies, how many times? Here's the thing. Guys, ladies, here's the thing. Guys, sometimes, here's what men think. Sometimes, guys, men think that women dress for you. So here, she's got this, this, wow, she's kind of like, say swimsuits, here we go. She got this, really, they wanted to save money on material here. So, on the swimsuit, and okay, she's wearing this for me. She's wearing this so I can look at her. Because that's sometimes the message being said, right? My Tarzan thing was not, hey, look at me. It was more like, I'm going to be Tarzan. But what would I be saying? It would be like, look at the freak with the thong. Someday he'll be a priest. It'll be fine. But guys, women, here's the secret. Women don't dress for men. Women dress for other women. If that was not true, how would you ever explain women who go to get their toenails done? Ladies, when was the last time you had your toenails done and a guy was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Your boyfriend was like, look at your toes. They are so cute. Never, I submit, never ever. How many girls oh my gosh, look at your... Guys, women don't dress for you. They dress for other women. And they're also not dressing for us ever, or anyone, to objectify. And yet, what a dilemma to be in, ladies, isn't this? I imagine that swimsuit shopping must be the most stressful kind of experience ever, because you go to the store or wherever you buy online, and it's okay. It's either, here are my options, 2 options for every girl. String bikini or burlap sack. It's either skimpiest everything or Amish. These are the only 2 options that you have. And so then when it's burlap chafes. I'm going to go the other direction. And then people say, oh, that's what that means. It's not what that means. It might be what's being said, because you'd say, I'm saying Tarzan, you're saying you're here, your cheeks. And so for all of us, what's the call? The call for every single one of us is to say, okay, when it comes to our bodies, remember we are our bodies, what we do with our bodies matters. It's not a condemnation of anybody, except for me and my Tarzan thing. What it really is, just highlighting the fact that our bodies are always speaking. Our actions are always saying something, even if that's not what we want to say. So, quick, should I just keep going?
Go for it.
Here's the question. Signs of mature love. Love reaches its maturity when it turns from how the other person makes me feel to who the other person is. Reaches maturity when it turns from how the other person makes me feel to who the other person is. I have to have a confession to make. I watched the season finale of The Bachelorette this year. Yes, I didn't have to, but I had to. I was visiting a family, they were watching the season finale, they've been following the whole story, so I'm here, this is me turning off, I'm it's fine, this is research. And one of the things I found was there was I think 3 guys at the end, I didn't study that closely. At the end there was 3 guys, and every single one of them said the same thing. I feel something with you that I've never felt with anyone before. You make me feel something that I've never felt in my entire life. I've been married before, but I never even felt that with my previous wife. All these things are just you make me feel X, you make me feel Y, you make me feel so unique, and that's a sure sign of my love for you. And here's what we're talking about. Mature love, though, moves from how the other person makes me feel to who the other person is. Which is one of the reasons why, please, guys, promise me, I state your name, will never want the Bachelor or Bachelorette. Amen. Because There's not enough time to get to know who the other person is. That's not even the point of the show. It's just to say, how did they make me feel? That's a sure sign of my love for them. It's not. Because what does it say here next? It says, how do we distinguish between authentic love and lust? It's not always plain and obvious. Sometimes it's concealed and it passes itself off as love. Lust compels people very powerfully towards physical intimacy, but if it goes out of nothing more than lust, it's not love. The last thing I want to say in this section, we're taking a break and pass on the Nick and I'll take a break. I remember a friend of mine, his name is Mark, at one point, this is just an incredible example of distinguishing between love and lust and the cost, the price it's going to take, like for us to really love people around us. At one point, Mark, he grew up in southwestern United States, and he got accepted to Notre Dame. And so he went to Notre Dame. It was his dream to go to school where the Fighting Irish play every single Saturday. And he got on campus, and he was just like, this is awesome. I'm free. I'm not with my family. I'm here. And the first weekend, he met kind of his friend group. And in that friend group, there was this one girl who just like captured his attention, captured his heart, captured his everything. Someone who was like way above it, out of his league kind of a situation, and he fell hard for her, and she didn't give any indication that she was really interested in him, but he just, kind of a puppy dog for a little while. First couple weeks of class, he just like, everything was about this girl. And at one point, they had the homecoming weekend. I don't know if you know anything about Notre Dame, but they're kind of into football. And so at one point, she asks him if he would go with her to the game and to the homecoming dance afterwards. And he was like, yeah. So he could not wait for this. This is the girl of his dreams who asked him to go to the homecoming dance, asked him to go to the game. And so, he's super funny, super smart, just really witty. He charmed her like the entire day. Like she had an incredible time at the game, incredible time at the dance. At one point though, she asks him at the dance to go get her some drinks. And so he goes, the punch bowl, whatever, this is back in the 90s. And he gets some drinks and he comes back to where she was standing, and she's gone. And so he's kind of looking around like you would, like, okay, I'm not panicked. I'm not just 2 glasses in my hand, no problem. I do this all the time. And he kind of started walking around. She didn't come back, and walked around the whole, like, wherever they had the dance, and comes back, doesn't see her, asks some of the friends, hey, is she in the bathroom or something? They check. No, she's not. She's left. She totally ditched him in the middle of this dance. And he was just like, so he said he put the glasses down and kind of walked across campus by himself. Why stay at the dance? I'm just going to go back to my apartment, like the Charlie Brown. Goes back to his apartment on campus, and it was a suite. So you walk in, and then there's the kitchenette, and there's you guys know what suites are, the living space, and then there's bedrooms off to the side. So like 6 guys lived in this apartment. And he walked into his dorm room, or his bedroom, and he opens the door, and there's some clothes on the floor. And he's like, hello. And then he hears from his bunk that's been lofted this woman's voice. Hey, Mark. Well, hello. And he's like, oh my gosh. He gets kind of startled, like one would get. And he looks up and he says, the first thing he could say was like, I got you punch. She's like, oh yeah. Sorry, I came back here. And he said, oh, because then he came out like, okay, what is happening here? Her clothes are down here. She's in my bed, naked. And again, he said, all he could say was, did I do something wrong? Because you just left. And she said, no, I had a great time today. And so I just wanted to come back here and I wanted to thank you. So come on up. And in that moment, Mark had this realization, this awareness. He said, at that moment I knew, like this is this woman of my dreams. I could just, here she is, like in my bed, naked. I could just shut this door and no one will know. My youth group back home, I have no idea. My friends back home, no idea. My friends back home, my family, my brothers, no idea. They have confession tomorrow morning, no problem. But he's also convicted by this, like, no, I know this is not what I'm made for. This is not what I'm called to. It's like she's worth something more than this. And so that's what he said. He stopped and he's like, I really like you so much. And I would love to date you, but I can't do this. You're worth way too much. I can't do this because you're worth so much more than this. And he says, so just, if you want, we can go back to the dance. I'll leave you so you can get dressed and we'll go back to the dance. And so he shuts the door and then goes to the couch, sits down, he's like, oh yes, kind of like we did it. This is like the key moment of his life. This is going to be like the great youth ministry story of all time, kind of a situation where it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was that guy, I had that chance, and I like rose to the occasion, defended her honor. So good. And she gets dressed, she comes out, and he stands up like, yeah, we can go to the party if you want. And she walks right up to him and just without even stopping, she looks him right in the face and just slaps him across the face. She says, you're going to regret this. And he said from that moment on, all this friend group, they wouldn't talk to him anymore. That he would go to the cafeteria, and the people he used to sit with, all these friends, they just like, no, you don't need to join us. He said his 5 roommates, right? He said 3 of them never talked to him again. 1 of them just made fun of him. And the 5th one would say, yeah, like, Mark, I get it. You're religious and stuff. I never would have done that. He said every time he saw her in the hallway, she just stared daggers at him, just like, she absolutely hates you. I want you to die right now. For the entire year. He said the next year, he said it was so, I had to find a whole new group of friends, all these things. Said the next year, and the sophomore and junior year and senior year, she never would look at him. I mean, at first, that freshman year, she's just like, I hate you so much. And then the rest of the entire time in college, she wouldn't even look at him. And he just was bewildered, so perplexed, and so just troubled by this. Years later, it's another homecoming game. He's graduated, they graduated, everything moved on. And Mark comes back to Notre Dame with his future wife, Melanie. At the time they're just dating, and with his parents, his mom and dad. At the tailgate, and they're having fun, back in Notre Dame, having this homecoming thing with his future wife, this woman he loves, and his parents and stuff. And at one point he says he saw this woman, he sees this woman walking through the parking lot, walking directly towards him, and he said next to her walks this like giant tree of a man. And she's looking right at him, and they're coming right towards him. He said, he just became petrified, and he turned to Melanie and said, Melanie, I love you. I'm about to die. Just remember that I love you. She said when she got this woman gets close, her face turns into this massive smile, and she cries out, Mark, I'm so glad you made it. And she like jumps into his arms, gives him this massive hug, and he's just like, what is happening right now? And they kind of do this, hi, good to see you, and this is Melanie. And she says, Mark, I was so hoping you'd be here. Do you remember that dance our freshman year? It's like, let me think. Dance, you say? He's like, yeah, I do. She says, that night, I was so mad at you. The whole rest, I'm so sorry. All the people all of our friends that I just said so many bad things about you. I turned them all, and I'm so sorry. That whole year, I just hated you. I hated you. And he's like, I kind of caught that. I got that impression. And she said, because I hated you because that night, you told me that I was worth more than I believed I was. And when you said that I was worth more than this, all I could hear was you saying, I'm not worth you. I'm not worth this. That I'm not worth anything. Because up to that point, that's how I had tried to thank guys. That's how I saw myself. I was just worthy of being used by guys. And then you told me that I was worth more than that, and I knew that that wasn't true. So every time I saw you, I heard those words in my head and in my heart that you're worth more than that, and I thought, no, that's not true. I was so mad at you. But then that summer, after our freshman year, she said, something happened in my heart, and I knew that you were telling me the truth because I encountered Jesus in this way that I realized my story isn't over. But then I was so embarrassed, and I was so ashamed of myself for doing this that I couldn't even look you in the eye. And so all those next years until we graduated, whenever I saw you, I was so embarrassed. But I want you to know that ever since that night when you told me that I was worth more than this, even though I didn't believe it, I decided I'm going to live like that. Because Mark says, I'm worth more than this. And so I want you to know that since that night until the night that I married this guy, that I lived like I was worth more than that. And you gave that back to me. And Mark says that's when the tree steps forward and stretched out a limb. And he shook Mark's hand and he said, I just want to thank the hand of the man who was there to guard my wife when I wasn't. Because this is what it comes down to, right? Sexual honesty means never telling a lie with my body. But it always comes at a cost. But it also always comes with a gift.
When we first found Theology of the Body, we had been married 6.5 years, and I had the history of the influence of porn, and didn't know how to love correctly. Didn't know how to not think of my wife as, okay, I don't sleep with anyone else, but I don't even look at porn, but you have to be that for me then. And there was definitely all the things you shouldn't do, I had gotten really good at doing, with coercion and I wasn't realizing that I was tanking the marriage, but I was tanking the marriage. And then so we discover the church, and we find Theology of the Body, and this change starts happening in us. And I was beginning to see how broken I was, just beginning. And so I got shipped off to the training, and the night before I went, I flew out of Minneapolis, we went down and we stayed in a hotel, and basically I was just pressuring for sex again. And my wife was like, listen, fine, we can, but can I just put a pillow over my face? And I was like, yeah, fine, I don't care. Like that's the state of affairs we were in the night before I went to Theology of the Body. Just broken. Like I don't care, I want your body, and that's it. And she had even said a few weeks prior, like, you make me feel that if for some reason I ever couldn't have sex with you, that you'd move on. And I didn't feel that way, but that's the way I made her feel. So I go to Theology of the Body, and you get there, and it's exciting. Everybody's come from all over the country, and Sunday was great, and Monday was awesome, and you're learning all the stuff we learned. And then you get to Tuesday, and Tuesday was hell. Tuesday was all of this, like finding all your brokenness. I sat in the back. I cried a whole day. I was just that blubbering idiot in the back. Just nobody talked to me. They were all scared of me because I just cried and cried and cried. Because I would see like a rapid fire of every time I had taken from my wife in our 7 years of marriage. Every time I had grasped and influenced and coerced and was passive aggressive, all of those things, they wouldn't leave my eyes. I saw everything I had done. And at one point, Christopher West says, guys, gentlemen in this room, some of you may have harmed your wives so much through your use that you need to go home and offer her 14 years of celibacy to show her that you're in it for her and not her body. And if you're not willing to do that, you don't love your wife. And it was like a knife through my heart. Because I was aware. I was supremely aware of what I had done. And so we made it through the week. I made it. I stopped crying. And I got on the plane and I got home. And when I walked in the front door, my wife was there. She was she was standing there. And she's like, hey. And I'm like, shh, okay. You just have to sit down. Just sit down at the table. I want to say this. And we sat down at the table and I looked her in the eye and I said, I've taken 7 years from you. I've used you and I've taken 7 years from you. And so if it means that I have to give you 7 years back of celibacy, for you to know that I'm in it for you and not for your body, I will do that. And then I prayed that she wouldn't take me up on it. Like deep groaning prayer inside, just no! And there was this pause, and my wife, her face softened, and she said, okay. And I thought, no! What have I done? And for us, I had realized that I wasn't treating her as unique and unrepeatable. I was treating her as mine, as body parts, as mine for the taking. And so we did. We entered into a long period of celibacy where we both decided on a time and just like, nope, we're not even dating. We're brother and sister. We're just going to live together. And I tell you, my wife had grown very cold. My wife, through my actions, she had grown away from me. And I saw in that time where we said no, and where I just showed her, like, I don't care if we ever again, I am here for you, I love you. When I was able to do that finally as a man, as a husband, to watch my wife fall in love with me again. And I thought we were, like, my whole family messes up marriages. I thought we were going the same route. And then to see this change, all from that. So when we're talking about signs of mature love, that's what had happened finally in my life, is I was able to see it was about her as a person and nothing else. Just who she actually was and what was good for her. And that's like an encouragement to you, that it doesn't matter how far or fractured you are. Christ wants to bring you to that mature love, to a mature love where you can truly see the other person and your sacrifice, because you know what that did. To God's credit, my being able to say no and just show her that I could say no, that brought life. That awakened her inside. It showed her love, and she came alive because of that sacrifice. And that's what we get to strive to, is to strive to attain that as a mature love, where we see the other person and not just their attributes.
So we're just going to conclude this talk real briefly. If you look to the last page of your notes where it talks about personhood and the joy and the challenge, as Nic was saying, every person is totally unique and unrepeatable. Qualities are repeatable. We sometimes fall in love with people's qualities, and that love, when it matures, it reaches beyond the qualities to the heart of the person. Like Nic was talking about millisecond number 1, when he saw Jason the first time, just like qualities. All he knew about her were her qualities. All he knew was that here she is, this beautiful woman. For that love to mature, it has to move past qualities. Because if my love is rooted in someone else's qualities, there are always others who are going to have those qualities to a greater degree. And so love has to get past that place of qualities to the person. And that's the joy and the challenge of all of this. So again, this talk was, again, to take away with this is God's love has 4 marks. It's free, it's total, it's faithful, it's fruitful. So if our love is going to be like God's love, it has to have those 4 marks. And I can never ever work against those if it's going to be love. The other part is, how do I do that? It's because the body has a language. And I always want to speak the truth with my body. And that's just something as simple as a handshake, something as simple as more profound as an embrace. It's something as profound as the sexual embrace. It's just something as ridiculous as a leopard print thong. So all of this, take away from this, just write down leopard print. That's the joy. Thongs. Because we've been so deeply affected by society's sexual confusion, coming to understand and embrace God's plan for sexual union is among the most important things any of us can do to prepare for our vocation. Whether you're called to be a husband or a wife, a priest or a religious sister, to understand this, how I fully can love, whether that be Philia, Eros, agape, or storge. How do I love like Jesus?